Moore joins us once again, co-founder of the Committee for Prosperity, host of More Money, and author of The Trump Economic Miracle. Steve, welcome back to the show. Thanks for being with us this afternoon. Steve, can you hear me okay?
Can you hear me?
Yep, there you are. Good to have you back on the show. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
I want to ask you about the balance right now for people who are talking about affordability, because with what's going on in Iran, it's a real thing. Of course, gas prices, you can't not talk about gas prices. What is your perspective on the health and strength of the American economy right now?
Well, we got some really good reports that have come out since the last time you and I talked last week. That we got a good number on industrial production, and we got a good number. The amount of money that Americans are investing, especially American companies, are investing a lot in AI and in technology. So that is a very strong leading signal for growth in the economy in the future. We've got the Nasdaq, the S&P 500, and the Dow Jones at near or record highs of all time. And we got a pretty good jobs report on Friday showing that the American companies are still hiring workers. So, now look, there's a lot of problems too. People are upset about affordability. They're upset about, $4.25 to fill up per gallon of gasoline. Food prices continue to rise. So that's a problem for a lot of families. So we've got to bring that inflation rate down.
What does this administration need to do? I live in Illinois. You know that gas is $4.99. I can't find it any cheaper than that in my area in southern Illinois. Go across the river, right across the river in St. Louis, Missouri. Now they're taking advantage of all of us Illinois folks, but it's $4.39 across the river.
Yeah.
That and the affordability of food and other things. What can the administration do to help alleviate some of this burden for Americans?
Well, first of all, obviously, so much of this depends on what happens in the Middle East and with Iran and getting the Strait of Hormuz open, which is the channel for about over a third of all the oil that's produced in the world. So that's critical, and hopefully it'll happen soon. But in the meantime, I kind of like this idea the president has been talking about suspending the federal gas tax. That would save people about 30 or 40 cents a gallon, just temporarily until we get the supply problems over. And then, by the way, every state, Illinois has one of the highest gas taxes.
Yep.
Did you know that?
Yes, and people are calling on them to suspend it for right now. They did during COVID, I believe, but no word yet if the Democrats are going to step up to the plate.
Yeah, I think that there should be, again, for 30 or 60 days, they should eliminate the state gas tax in Missouri and in Illinois, but especially in Illinois, because I think it's about twice as expensive in Illinois in terms of the tax. And then we ought to do something about these blending requirements. When they pump the oil out of places like the Permian Basin in Texas, then it goes to refineries, and the refineries take the crude oil. That's why we call it crude oil, and they turn it into gasoline by mixing it with various types of additives, et cetera. And so we have so many requirements, like the ethanol requirement, that it makes it much more expensive to produce a gallon of gas. Let's suspend those, for now, again, just for 30 or 60 days. And that would probably bring the cost down by another 25 cents a gallon. And, you can bring the price down to a very reasonable amount. And then when the crisis is over, you can go back to the old. And that's something that I would recommend. But thank God that we have a president who does drill, baby, drill.
Yeah.
Because if we weren't drilling for our oil right now, if we had the zero production policy that Biden wanted, we'd be paying $8 a gallon for gas.
Yeah, I always look at the California numbers as an Illinois resident. I don't know how that makes me feel any better. It just
they're paying $6.25 a gallon. A friend of mine in California showed me a gas station in L.A. Almost $8 a gallon.
Mm. It's outrageous. I don't even know how I guess you just walk everywhere in California. Steve Moore speaking with us right now, co-founder for the Committee for Prosperity. I want to highlight a graph here. I'm looking on the Committee to Unleash Prosperity.com website, and I'm sharing it here with our visual audience on our live stream. But there is a great illustration here and the highlighting of how we are draining the swamp, because I would assume that this would have long-term benefits for how our government functions and where our economy is strengthened. Can you talk to us about the difference? Not every job in a jobs report is created equally when it comes to private and public jobs.
Well put. And so what's happened under Trump is that we've reduced the federal employment by over 300,000 people. So that is the definition of draining the swamp. And that's been about a 15% reduction in the federal workforce, the lowest federal workforce we have had since the late 1960s, which is a real accomplishment for Trump. And do you remember, Annie, when we would talk 3 or 4 years ago when Biden was president, they say, oh, the economy just created 200,000 jobs. Like half of them would be government jobs.
Yeah.
They were just adding up onto the debt and adding up to the amount of federal bureaucrats. Well, Trump is doing just the opposite. So every new job that has been created by Donald J. Trump has been a private sector job.
Yeah. And, the other thing, too, I don't know how you probably feel much more bothered by this than I do because you understand these numbers, but it does bother me. So many reports that came out during the Biden administration, and I understand the revisions do happen, but dramatic revisions. We'd have a really, championed jobs report during the Biden administration. A month later, quietly, it would get revised significantly so that the numbers that were being championed were actually not to be championed at all. How do you feel about the adequacy of reporting that's coming out now compared to before? Could the Trump administration be, spicing them up a little bit to make themselves look good? How do you feel about the accuracy?
Well, when you have random errors, and you're going to get random errors when you do samples, the errors should be random. In other words, they shouldn't be all in one direction. And what was happening under Biden was we were getting the errors, but they were always, we over-reported the jobs. But no, the only thing people pay attention to is what we call the headline number when it comes out on the first Friday of every month. And so, say, the economy created 250,000 jobs. And then 1 month later, it was actually only 200. And then another month later, it's only 150. So it was not random. And so now that's part of the problem. But the other part of the problem is just this is a big problem for government accounting for jobs, accounting for incomes, and so on. A lot of this is done by surveys. And what's happened is the government used to have like a 75% survey response to the surveys, and now the responses are well below 50%. So they're not as accurate. It's a big problem for government because we rely on these statistics and they're increasingly unreliable.
Well, Steve Moore, last question before we let you go. We are very grateful for your time today. We have this Iran thing. It's the biggest elephant in the room. But do you think that even in spite of that, is the economy stronger now because President Trump has been in office for a year? Or is it too soon to tell?
Oh, there's no question about it. It has. And I used this word on Fox News this morning, that what we have right now is an incredibly resilient economy. So even though we've economy's taken a hit, the rising oil price is like a tax on the American economy, and we just steam forward. We have companies that are continuing to hire, continuing to invest, and that's because we've got a president who puts America first.
Well, amen. Steve Moore, thank you for your time today.
Okay, Annie.
We'll talk to you again
Great
soon.
to
Take care.